It was a quiet summer afternoon in Vero Beach, Florida. A neighborhood where nothing like this was supposed to happen. No one heard the screams at first. No one saw the violence inside the house. But then, a girl appeared. Naked, terrified, running barefoot down the street. She had been held for hours, assaulted, tortured, and now, somehow, she had gotten free. Freedom was right there, just a little farther, just a few more steps. Behind her, a man burst out of the house, naked, enraged, a gun in his hand. He ran after her, closing the distance with every step. She ran barefoot across the pavement, her legs weakening with every step. He was gaining. Then suddenly, she fell. Her body hit the ground hard. The air knocked from her chest. In that instant, the distance she had fought so desperately to create was gone. He reached her, and with him, any remaining hope of escape disappeared. She tried with all of her might to fight him off. And then, a gunshot echoed through the neighborhood. Moments later, police would arrive at the house. Inside, they would find another girl, alive, barely. And in the trunk of the car parked in the driveway, the body of 17-year-old Lynn Elliott. Welcome back to Greetings from Florida. I'm your host, Joe Torino. Today we're going to Vero Beach, Florida, where in the early 1980s, young girls and women began to disappear. For a long time, there were no answers, no suspects, no arrests, no explanation, until July 26, 1983. What police discovered that day would expose one of the most disturbing serial murder cases in Florida history. The men responsible were David Allen Gore and his cousin, Fred Waterfield. They would later become known as the Killing Cousins. David Allen Gore was born in 1951 and raised in Indian River County, Florida. By most outward appearances, he blended in. He attended Vero Beach High School. He worked ordinary jobs. He lived with his family. He was quiet, heavyset, observant. But beneath that exterior, Gore had already begun developing obsessions that would later define his life. He studied firearms, learned how they worked, how to disassemble, clean, and maintain them, and he learned how to use them. he also studied women. He watched them, observed them, learned their routines, when they left home, when they returned, when they were alone. At one point, while working at a gas station, Gore secretly drilled a peephole between the men and women's restrooms so that he could spy on female customers. When his employer discovered it, Gore was fired. It was an early warning sign, a glimpse into what he was already becoming. But David Gore was not alone. His cousin Fred Waterfield was just 1 year younger. Unlike Gore, Waterfield had been popular in high school. He played football at Vero Beach High. He was physically strong, confident, outgoing. Where Gore was quiet and observant, Waterfield was aggressive. He also had a violent temper and a dark appetite for control, just like his cousin David. By the mid-1970s, the two cousins had begun spending time together with a shared purpose, and together they formed something far more dangerous than either one was alone. They talked openly about abducting women. You see, they didn't see women as people. They saw them as targets. They referred to it as hunting. Their early attempts were clumsy, amateur, unrefined. At one point, Waterfield fired a rifle at a woman's car near Yeehaw Junction, flattening her tires, but she managed to escape on foot before they could reach her. Another time, they followed a woman from Vero Beach all the way to Miami. They tracked her through traffic, watched her every move, but when she parked on a crowded street, they abandoned the attempt. They were learning, refining their methods, watching, waiting, studying every failure until they eventually succeeded. Their first known victim was abducted and raped near Vero Beach. She reported the attack to the police, but later, she refused to testify, and without her cooperation, the case collapsed. There were no arrests, no consequences, and that moment may have reinforced something dangerous in both men. They could do this and get away with it. By early 1981, their ability to hunt had evolved. David Gore had taken a position as an auxiliary deputy sheriff in Indian River County. He wore a badge, carried handcuffs, and drove a patrol vehicle. It gave him authority, legitimacy. To anyone that saw him, he was law enforcement. And women trusted the badge. So when he stopped them, they didn't run. They complied. At the same time, he worked during the day as a caretaker of a citrus grove owned by his family. Miles of orange trees stretched in every direction. Miles of isolation. No witnesses. No interruptions. Fred Waterfield immediately recognized the opportunity. He had moved to Orlando where he managed an automotive shop, but he returned frequently to Indian River County. And when he did, he came with purpose. He made Gore an offer: $1,000 for every young woman he abducted and delivered. It was no longer just violence. It was a system, a partnership. And Waterfield wasn't just participating. He was financing it, investing in it. A business built on human suffering. Gore would find them, while Waterfield would wait for them at the citrus grove. And together, they would control them. Then, in February 1981, the hunt would end, and the killing would begin.
People who actually might care about her, like,
On February 19, 1981, 17-year-old Yinghua Ling stepped off of her school bus and began the short walk home. It was routine, safe, predictable. She had no reason to believe anyone was watching her. But someone was. David Gore had already seen her before. He had studied her routine. He knew where she got off the bus, he knew where she walked, and he knew she was vulnerable. When he pulled up beside her in his vehicle, he was calm, controlled, authoritative. He showed her his badge and told her he needed to speak with her. To Yinghua, he wasn't a stranger. He was law enforcement, someone she had been taught to trust. Believing she had no choice, she complied and then got into his vehicle. But instead of driving to a police station, he drove her home. And when they arrived, something unexpected happened. Her mother, Sang-Huang Ling, was there. Mrs. Ling was 48 years old, protective, and alert. She immediately sensed something was wrong, but Gore adapted instantly. He pulled out his handcuffs and told both women they were under arrest. Then he handcuffed them together, mother and daughter, bound to each other. He forced them into his vehicle and then drove away. Not to a police station, not to a jail, but to the citrus grove. Miles of orange trees, isolation, no help, no escape. Neither of them understood what was happening. Neither of them knew they were never leaving. When they arrived, Gore made a phone call to Fred Waterfield. He told him he had a delivery, and Waterfield began driving from Orlando. He was coming to collect what he paid for. And while Gore waited, he began the assault, raping the mother and daughter, using the badge, the handcuffs, the illusion of authority to control them, to break them, to remove their humanity. When Waterfield arrived, He evaluated the victims. He rejected the mother because she was too old. She had no value to him. She was restrained, left bound, and at some point during that restraint, she died, strangled by the very bonds that held her in place. Then Waterfield turned his attention to 17-year-old Yinghua, who he raped. And when he was done, he murdered her. A young woman with a lifetime full of possibilities ahead of her. Instead, her life was reduced to a transaction, a payment, a completed delivery. When it was over, Waterfield paid Gore $400 and drove away. He left Gore alone in the grove, alone with the bodies, alone with the responsibility of making them disappear. Gore understood what needed to be done. He retrieved oil drums from the property. He dismembered the bodies, methodically, deliberately, not in panic, not in fear, but with intention. He placed their remains into drums, sealed them, and buried them deep within the citrus grove, surrounded by miles of orange trees, hidden beneath the soil, where no one would see, where no one would find them. When he finished, he left the grove, and life continued around him. Cars passed, families ate dinner, children played outside, completely unaware of what had just happened. 2 people had vanished, and no one knew why. Five months passed without discovery. No arrests, no bodies, no answers. David Gore continued living his life in Indian River County, working in the citrus groves, blending in, waiting. Fred Waterfield continued managing his automotive shop in Orlando, but he stayed in contact because what they had built wasn't finished. It was working, and they were ready to do it again. On July 15, 1981, 35-year-old Judith K. Daly arrived in Vero Beach. She wasn't unfamiliar with the area. Judith had previously lived in nearby Fort Pierce before moving to California, but now she was back, visiting, spending time along the same coastline she had once known. That afternoon, she drove to Round Island Park. The beach was quiet, peaceful, safe. She walked along the shoreline, unaware she was being watched. David Gore had already seen her. He studied her appearance, her movements, her vehicle. When Judith left the beach and walked away from her car, Gore made his move. He approached her vehicle, opened the hood, and disabled it. He didn't damage it beyond repair. He only needed it to fail temporarily. When Judith returned, she tried to start the engine, but nothing happened. She tried again, still nothing. She was stranded, alone, and exactly where Gore wanted her. Gore approached calmly. He asked if she needed assistance and offered to drive her to a phone. He appeared safe, normal, trustworthy. So she accepted, got into his truck, and they began to drive away. Minutes later, Gore produced a handgun and handcuffed her. The helpful stranger was gone. Gore drove her to the citrus grove, the same grove where Yinghua Ling and her mother had disappeared 5 months earlier. And once again, he made the call. When Fred Waterfield arrived, he examined her, and this time, he approved. Judith Daly was exactly what he wanted. She was restrained, and both men raped her. She was powerless, alone. They controlled her completely. When they were finished, Waterfield paid Gore $1,500, more than 3 times the payment for the Ling murders, because now it was proven the system worked, and it had become profitable. Waterfield left, and once again Gore remained behind, alone with his victim. She was still alive, still conscious, still fighting for survival. But there was no escape. Gore murdered her, then transported her body away from the grove to a remote canal, a place he knew well, a place where nature would erase the evidence. Years later, Gore would confess that he disposed of her body in a canal inhabited by alligators, predators capable of destroying evidence completely, removing any trace that she had ever been there. Judith Daly vanished. Her family had no answers, no explanation, no closure, and Gore returned to his life, working, driving, existing among everyone else, undetected. But his authority would soon be taken from him, and when it was, he would become even more dangerous. By the summer of 1981, David Gore had refined his method. He knew how to identify victims, how to approach them, how to control them, and how to make them disappear. But his authority would soon be taken away, and it began with a mistake. One night, Gore was driving his patrol vehicle when he came upon a teenage girl walking alone along a rural road. He stopped and told her that he needed to question her, and because she believed that he was law enforcement, she stopped to speak to him. He spoke calmly, confidently, but something felt wrong. His behavior didn't match his authority. His tone, his presence, his intent. She sensed it, and she refused to comply. Instead of submitting, she ran, she escaped, and she reported the encounter. Her report triggered suspicion. Questions began to form around Gore's behavior, his conduct, and his authority. Not long after that incident, Gore was discovered crouched inside a woman's vehicle outside of a medical clinic in Vero Beach. He wasn't responding to a call. He was hiding, waiting for the woman to return. Inside the vehicle, officers found a handgun, handcuffs, rope, and a police scanner. His tools of abduction, tools of control. He was arrested and charged with armed trespassing. His badge was taken away from him. His authority stripped away. His ability to use law enforcement as a weapon, gone. In court, Gore was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison, but he would only serve 18 months. In March of 1983, David Gore was released and returned to Indian River County. But now, he had learned something important. All he needed was opportunity, and he would find it again soon, very soon. David Gore had been out of prison only a short time, but prison hadn't changed him. It hadn't stopped him. It had only delayed him. And when he returned to Indian River County, he returned to the only life he knew. Fred Waterfield came back too. Back to the same roads, the same citrus groves, the same isolation that had protected them before. They didn't need to discuss it, but they both understood. The hunt was resuming. Only now, Gore no longer had a badge, no uniform, no authority to manufacture trust. But he had something more dangerous: confidence, experience. He had done this before. He had taken lives, disposed of bodies, and walked away undetected. And on May 20th, 1983, they went looking. That day, they spotted a woman in Orlando. They approached her with a gun, threatened her, and tried to force her into their vehicle. But she resisted. She fought, and she escaped. It was the first time a victim had slipped through their hands in years. But failure didn't create hesitation. It created urgency. Because the very next day, they found 2 new targets: 14-year-olds Barbara Byer and Angelica Lavallee. They were hitchhiking, standing beside the road, waiting. When Gore and Waterfield pulled over, they offered them a ride, and the girls accepted. They didn't know who they were getting into the vehicle with. They didn't know what these men had already done, and they didn't know that they would never be seen alive again. Gore drove them away from the road, away from safety, away from anyone who could help them. The isolation came quickly, and once they were alone, the control began. The girls were overpowered, restrained, and raped. There was no escape, no one to hear them, no one to stop it. And when the assaults were over, Gore raised his gun and fired. 2 more lives ended. 2 more children erased. Afterward, their bodies were separated. Barbara Byer was dismembered and buried in a shallow grave, while Angelica Lavallee was thrown into a nearby canal, disposed of like evidence, not like human beings. And once again, they'd return to their lives, invisible, untouched. But this time, their violence had accelerated. They were no longer experimenting. They were no longer refining. They were killing without hesitation. And within weeks, they would take another victim, one who would refuse to die quietly, one who would run. And when she ran, everything would finally begin to collapse. July 26, 1983. It was mid-afternoon in Vero Beach. 14-year-old Reagan Martin and 17-year-old Lynn Elliott were hitchhiking. Cars passed, drivers glanced, most kept going, until one vehicle stopped, and inside were two men, David Gore and Fred Waterfield. They offered the girls a ride, and the girls got in. At first, nothing seemed wrong, but it didn't take long for that to change. A gun appeared, commands were given, control was established. The girls were no longer passengers. They were captives. They were driven to a house on 5th Street Southwest owned by Gore's family, a place hidden in plain sight. Inside, the girls were separated, restrained, and assaulted repeatedly. As the hours passed, neither girl knew if they would survive. But Lynn Elliott made a decision. She wouldn't wait. At some point, she managed to free herself and ran out of the house into the daylight, naked, injured, terrified, but alive and moving. Behind her, Gore realized what had happened, and he ran after her. She ran barefoot across the pavement. Her only thought was the distance. Every step meant survival. But then, she fell. Her body hit the ground hard. And before she could recover, he reached her. She fought. She resisted. But it wasn't enough. Gore later told police what happened next. He said she tripped, he caught her, forced her to the ground, and shot her in the head twice at point-blank range. But this time, someone saw it. A teenage boy riding his bicycle nearby witnessed the attack. He saw the girl running, he saw the man chasing her, and he saw the gun. He rode away as fast as he could and told his mother, who called the police. At nearly the same time, another call came in from a man claiming to have seen a naked man chasing a girl through an orange grove. But police would later realize that caller was David Gore attempting to redirect them, attempting to buy time. But it was already too late. Police were on their way. When officers arrived at the house on 5th Street Southwest, they immediately noticed something wrong. A vehicle parked in the driveway, blood dripping from the trunk. Inside, they found the body of 17-year-old Lynn Elliott, shot in the head. But she was not the only victim there. Officers entered the house and began searching room by room until they heard something, movement above them in the attic. There they found 14-year-old Reagan Martin, naked and bound, but still alive. She had survived, and she told them everything. About Gore, about Waterfield, about the abduction, the assaults, and the murder. For the first time in years, there was a witness, and David Gore knew it. So he didn't run or try to resist. When police surrounded the house, he surrendered. Fred Waterfield was arrested soon after. Their partnership was over. Their control was gone. Their system had collapsed because one girl ran and one girl survived. David Alan Gore was finally in custody. For the first time in years, he couldn't escape. He couldn't control the situation. He couldn't hide behind authority. He was just another man in handcuffs. At first, he said very little. But investigators already had what they needed. They had Lynn Elliott's body. They had the surviving victim's testimony. And they had the witnesses who saw him chase Lynn down and shoot her. The case against him was overwhelming, and Gore knew it. Eventually, he began to talk. And when he did, he didn't confess to just one murder. He confessed to many. He told investigators about Yinghua Ling, her mother, Judith Daly, Barbara Byer, Angelica Lavallee. Victims who had vanished without answers. Victims whose families had been left in permanent uncertainty. Now finally, they knew. Search teams returned to the citrus grove, digging, excavating, recovering what remained. Oil drums buried beneath the soil, human remains hidden for years, evidence of crimes that had never been discovered. But Gore had not acted alone. He told investigators about Fred Waterfield, his cousin, partner, and financier. The man who participated, the man who helped turn murder into a system. When Waterfield was arrested, he did not confess. He denied responsibility, denied involvement, denied the truth. But the evidence told a different story, and so did Gore. Both men were charged, both men were tried, and both men were convicted. David Alan Gore was sentenced to death for the murder of Lynn Elliott, and for the other murders, he received multiple life sentences. Fred Waterfield was convicted of murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery, and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole for 50 years. But the damage they had left behind would never be undone. Families had lost daughters, mothers, children. Lives were stolen, futures erased. Not by strangers passing through, but by men who had lived among them, men who had blended in, men who had been trusted. David Alan Gore spent decades on death row. waiting, appealing, filing motion after motion, delaying the inevitable. Until finally, on April 12, 2012, he was escorted into the execution chamber at Florida State Prison. Gore was strapped to a gurney, his arms and legs secured. Witnesses watched from behind glass. Family members, officials, observers. But before the execution began, he was given the opportunity to speak. His final words were, "I'm sorry. I've had remorse. I'm not the man I was back then. I don't fear death." Moments later, the lethal injection process began, and at 6:19 p.m., David Allen Gore was pronounced dead. He was 61 years old. Fred Waterfield was imprisoned at Okeechobee Correctional Institution and was later transferred to Hardy Correctional Institution, where he remains to this day. For years, these crimes existed as disappearances, unanswered questions, empty bedrooms, birthdays that passed without them, and parents who didn't even know where to grieve. When Gore was finally stopped, the truth came out. Not as a mercy, but as a consequence of being caught. And even then, the pain didn't resolve neatly. Gore had named his cousin as a full partner, the man who financed it, participated in it, and helped him hunt. But Waterfield has spent decades insisting that isn't true, that he wasn't a predator, that he was trapped inside someone else's nightmare. He has said Gore lied. He has said the case against him was built to fit a story, and his family has continued pushing for his release. The victims' families and the investigators who worked this case have never wavered, because whatever Waterfield claims now, the outcome is the same. Yinghua Ling is gone. Sing Huang Ling is gone. Judith Daly is gone. Barbara Byer is gone. Angelica Lavallee is gone. Lynn Elliott is gone. And the reason we know any of it, the only reason these names weren't swallowed permanently by silence, is because one girl ran, one witness saw, and one girl survived. One afternoon in July, the hunting finally stopped. So if there's anything to take away from this story, it's this. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes, it looks like a man with a routine, a job, a familiar face, and the people who pay the price are the ones who never get to go home. Greetings from Florida is written, researched, and narrated by me, Joe Torino. Sound design and production by yours truly, with original theme music by Modern Mimes. You can find more stories, photos, and episode extras at @FloridaPod on Instagram, and visit FloridaPod.com for links to listen on any platform, plus the official merch store. And if you like what you hear, share the show, leave a review, or tell a friend who loves a little weird with their history. And as always, stay weird, Florida. We'll see you next time.